Welcome to the Communicating Capital podcast, where finance and communication get a fresh perspective. Hosted by a dynamic team of women in the industry, we're here to redefine the conversation with candid, no-nonsense interviews featuring top finance executives, communication experts, and industry leaders. With a focus on clarity and real-world impact, we make the complex world of finance digestible and relatable. Whether you're a seasoned professional or you're just interested in our world, we're here to help navigate the space in new and exciting ways. Today, I'm so excited to introduce someone that I've actually known for six plus years, Elliot Lane. He's joining us from Raleigh, North Carolina. Elliot is a senior VP of event partnerships at Benzinga. He leads B2B events and he drives growth and fosters industry connections. He's also deeply knowledgeable about the cannabis industry, and he leads the Cannabis Insider podcast. It's one of Benzinga's podcasts, alongside Javier Hasse. So Elliot, it's a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me, Jess. Elevate has been a wonderful, wonderful partner to work with since I've been at Benzinga. So we love you. We love what you all are doing. So excited to see this podcast launch.
You're so part of the Nice People Club, Elliot. I'm so excited. And I actually have known you for quite a while, and I've seen your career grow. Can you just give a little bit about your own background, both on a professional and a personal level?
Yeah, absolutely. So I started at Benzinga knowing legitimately nothing about finance, about cannabis, about sales. I was an actor in New York City. I managed restaurants as survival jobs, right? Eventually, one day, my brother, who also works at Benzinga, it's a perfect example of nepotism, right? Working with your family. But, he was like, hey, why don't you come work with me? I know you work hard. I know you, I can trust you. And I had him explain to me what he did at Benzinga, and I recognized no language that he utilized. I just did not understand anything. So eventually I went back to him, and I was just like, okay, try explain this to me like I'm two. Let's try a trial period. Like, I feel like this is probably not what I want to do. Here I am 6 years later, still at Benzinga. But I just started as a lowly business development rep, right? Just, bare entry, one of 20, and I was selling events, to start. But also, people at Benzinga, it's very much I would say we all know the business back to front, right? We can all talk about what we do on the editorial side, on the content side, on the video side, our live trading series, our pre-market prep shows. I mean, we all have a full understanding of the ecosystem, right? So that's what led me to, talking, to wonderful people such as yourself, being able to communicate how we can, create content, right, together, how we can create awareness, for investment opportunities for investors, because that is the ethos of which I work on, of which everybody at Benzinga works on, and that I've come to adopt over the past 6 years is how can we drive value to the everyday individual and how they can grow their own personal wealth. And it all comes back to that for us. But ultimately, I just really adopted the cannabis space personally and really enjoy that industry. The people within the industry are so hardworking. They're so innovative. It's an exciting space. Obviously, it's taken its own fair share of hits over the past few years, which I'm sure we can get in. But it's been a lot of fun. And I think because of that fun, because of the value that I think Benzinga can drive, I think I've really been able to take a step forward in Benzinga and, help lead that initiative.
I love that. And something that I know about you and Benzinga are these events that you put on. I know that you have some that are in Chicago, New York, and Florida. What goes into that? And I obviously a lot of work goes into it. So that is saying something in itself, but could you tell people kind of the step-by-step process? Because quite a few people do go to those events and you get huge names.
Yeah, it's, we're in the midst of planning our Chicago one upcoming, our next Cannabis Capital Conference. We stray away a little bit from the audience we speak to online. They still have access to this content. Our everyday audience still has access to the education that can come from these events. But these events are heavily B2B and heavily focused on getting business done and helping move the industry forward. And we do that by being an industry event, but with a financial through line. So there are lots of events in every industry, right? You have these giant trade shows, you have more sell-side focused conferences, small cap events, whatever they may be. And we started our event as an investor-led event. So, very much modeled after the small cap kind of presentation series. COVID, I think, changed the ball game for events everywhere. I don't think anybody was excluded from that. So we became more education centric, and we carried that over post COVID and grew significantly. We had, pre-COVID, we had around 900 people at one of our largest shows. Post-COVID, our largest show has approached 3,000. And these are C-suites. These are CEOs. These are presidents. These are our CMOs, CFOs, right? These are the people with decision-making powers in their companies. And pairing them, any successful event has an audience A, and then audience B can be a variety of people, right? Or whether you have audience A, B, C, or D, but we still have those investors as much as cannabis does, those capital deployers in the industry. And we are one of the main events where hundreds of millions of dollars of financing still take place in the industry. So we speak to people on a business level at our events. It's a wonderful funnel for creating more significant education and messaging, for these companies to the world at large, because we are one of the largest media platforms out there for the cannabis space, and I think that platform offers a ton of value. And that's what I'll come back to answer your question. And is I want what we do at Benzinga to be very value additive to the cannabis space. And if we don't lead with value for an emerging market like cannabis, like crypto, like psychedelics, like fintech, right? All markets that we cover pretty heavily, plus several others. If you don't lead with value, it's hard to be a mover and shaker in those industries. So I think Benzinga has done a very good job at making sure that we're value additive, making sure we have the right people talking about the right topics, making sure we have the right people in the rooms and different ways that people can network there. I think once this industry perhaps sees a little growth, I think you'll see Benzinga still making moves and getting a lot of business done for these companies in the future.
I love the idea about creating value for not only companies, but the investors and the vendors that are all going to your shows. Can you just share an example, if you're allowed to, can you share an example of a name of some company that has gone to one of these events and had just had significant value, whether it was for the investors themselves, or if it was a speaker that was at one of your events? There's something that you could highlight for our audience?
Yeah, we get hundreds upon hundreds of speaker applications for our events. I think that platform is very valuable. And once people speak at our events, they always get reach outs from attendees post-event. It's without fail. I will say, I think, we had a smaller one-day event in June 2024, depending upon when you're listening to this podcast. And we had a brand, because, there's no interstate commerce in cannabis, at least not for marijuana-derived products. So there was a brand that struck a massive licensing deal.
Wow.
And was able to expand into multiple other states because of, an event that had 350 executives at it, right? It's a smaller event. So the ethos there is very similar to our larger events in which we bring executives. We bring those decision makers who can make things happen for each other. So that's just one example. I know I spoke to an attorney friend of mine who he introduced his client to an investor at our Florida show in April, which is the same series as we're hosting in Chicago upcoming here. And they struck up a $20 million financing. Pretty much, within the 2 days they were at the event. So, stories like that are the reason we do what we do. Not everybody will find that value at an event, right? $20 million doesn't move just to move, but you do have to come prepared to events. You do have to know how to utilize events. There's, you do have to do the work pre-event, I think, to understand who you want to meet with and how you want to present yourself. But the people that know how to use events and do them well, they will find value at an event like Benzinga. So just kind of two different examples of how businesses can grow. They can grow on the operational side, or they can grow on the financial side at an event like ours.
It's huge. It's so huge. And I feel like with your support and your team's support, the companies can really make something happen there. I want to shift a little bit to your podcast, the Cannabis Insider podcast. Is that correct? Can you talk a little bit about that and and obviously it covers the cannabis space, but how long has it been around? What it's all about?
So I actually didn't start that podcast. That was my brother, my aforementioned shorter and older brother. Know that. And my then CEO, he now chairman. So Jason and Patrick started that podcast. And within, I would say, a month, Jason was like, all right, I'm done. So Jason, being the busy head of the company he is, obviously
Absolutely.
He wasn't going to keep up a weekly podcast on a specific industry. Patrick stayed with it for a little bit, but eventually it became like Javi and I after a couple months. And I wanted to keep it going. I was the impetus for that, and Javi was all on board. Javier is the head of our cannabis editorial team. I'm more of the cannabis publisher and head of events. So we work very well together in terms of when we can, but there is a clear separation of church and state there as well. So it's things that I fully kind of departed from my business development side and just wanted to be super value additive to partners, right? So, we know a bunch of PR firms in the industry and outside the industry, of course. And we interviewed hundreds of executives just to interview them, just to get to know them, just to get to give their company a platform, see what innovation is taking place in the space, see how markets are expanding and the obstacles that companies are running up against and how they are dealing with those obstacles. We've interviewed several federal politicians. We've interviewed Colin Hanks to Jim Belushi and Tommy Chong and, everywhere in between. And the podcast, I think, was a really effective platform for people in cannabis to see that credibility, of a close to mainstream, cannabis publication, giving them that space, right? And that was exciting for me, and a lot of those companies still attend our events, in one fashion or another, and they are a part of that ecosystem, right? I think if you go on to benzinga.com, most people either know us for our events or for our coverage, but there's a lot of things in between, that we do in a digital perspective, like podcasts. So I really enjoyed it. I think it really boosted my personal growth as well, because I was able to learn from these executives about the industry that I don't participate in as an entrepreneur. I participate in as a service provider. So, for me to be able to hear from them the everyday challenges that cannabis companies are dealing with was, I think, massive in us being able to grow our cannabis vertical and being more value additive and supportive of the industry at large.
I mean, you're saying you interviewed hundreds of different people in the industry. You're probably privy to a lot more information that the normal average Joe might have on the industry. Because of that, can you give us a little bit of insight into the cannabis industry? What are some exciting trends, developments that you're seeing right now, both from a business standpoint, but also from an investment standpoint?
I'll start off by saying it's been tough in the cannabis space, right, for a few years, and, tougher on people touching the plant than anybody else. So I would say especially probably early 2023, maybe late 2022, we started to see a decline in investor participation in the space. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Obviously, there's a lack of federal movement. Nothing was happening. Every time that we heard the Safe Banking Act, which is basically offering legal banking on a federal level for these companies, which banking is available for these companies. I will add that clarity, but it can get expensive depending upon how large your company is, who you're working with, right? I think you have to be very, very heavy in research and you have a large network to really find effective banking partners. But safe banking would open up all banking to you, right? Would open up small business loans, things of that nature, right? So every time that failed to pass Congress, you would see stocks take a tumble, right? Every time any of these other cannabis-related bills would fail to get any movement on a federal level, you would see the industry take a visible hit in the markets, right? And I think a lot of times it rebounded. After a while, though, I think there's a lot of investor exhaustion, right? And I think 2023 was just a massively bad year in comparison to previous years for investor participation. It really started in 2022 because you saw the large plant-touching operators in the U.S. really start to cut costs, cut people, create efficiencies within their business. They have since, I think, been able to come out of that. But in 2024, because of those efficiencies you saw in 23, a lot of the services and ancillary companies have had troubles and their budgets are completely different, right? So I think 2025, I think 24 was a step in the right direction. We have seen the FDA suggest to the DEA to reschedule cannabis to Schedule 3, which would, put this more in the medicinal pharmaceutical type of R&D landscape. However, it would get rid of 280E, which basically is a tax on all plant-touching companies where they pay an exorbitant amount of money to the federal government. If they got rid of that, a lot of companies within a year or roundabouts a year would find a lot of maybe perhaps flexibility in their balance sheet that they didn't have the year before that, right? It wouldn't be overnight. I think anybody saying it would be overnight is a little bit mistaken there. But there's a lot of benefits to this moving to Schedule 3. And right now, that's what the industry is focused on. And once that happens, you could see a lot of institutional support come out of the woodwork. But right now, I think they will take the hit on any growth that comes between now and rescheduling. And they will capitalize on the growth that comes between rescheduling and whatever's after that. So I think right now you have a lot of institutional interest and they're looking at the space, but I do think the institutions will make more of a move once we see some support from a regulatory landscape.
It sounds like there's more hope now than maybe there was a year ago. Does that sound correct to you, or is it kind of the same?
It does sound correct, right? I think when it comes to like small businesses, right, I do think the cannabis industry sometimes has blinders on. There's a lot more obstacles in cannabis than there is in other industries, but still the success rate of businesses isn't overtly high outside of cannabis. It's not like, I think cannabis is below 30% in terms of success rate. And I think outside of cannabis, it's like somewhere in the 40 to 50% range, right? So you would think that would naturally be higher than it is. So I think cannabis does still follow trends outside of, overall small cap participation has been down recently, right? Overall investor participation in the US market has been down, right? So I think cannabis is also affected by that on top of what you're already seeing in the industry itself. So ideally, if the cannabis market can, for its own reasons, draw more institutions, and then, maybe if we see some of the small cap momentum continue into 2025, right, we see more interest in emerging markets, more interest in riskier opportunities like cannabis. 2025, 2026 could be much, much better years for this industry.
It's incredibly insightful, actually incredibly insightful. I definitely want to see how that plays out because I'm not too privy about that industry, so I will be definitely checking it out. Elliot, do you mind if we shift a little bit to corporate partnerships? Because I know that you and I have known each other for quite a long time, and I feel like building those long-term professional relationships are so important. I just want to hear how do you feel that enhances your own business, I guess, your own role at Benzinga?
I mean, my network is me, right? For the rest of my life, right? I think that goes for everybody. In the corporate landscape. Maybe if you're in operations or development, you might have a different perspective on that. It's your experience, it's your technical whiz that gets you hired. But for somebody that is client facing, somebody that develops products directly for partners, I find that, listening to our partners, understanding, how we can solve problems, and then making sure those relationships feel like I care, because I do, it is the whole impetus to any success I have now and can have in the future. So partnerships is the lifeblood of every business. And, I may be alone in this. I don't know what you feel. Everybody's selling something, right? I think sales sometimes gets a bad rap, but I do think that ultimately everybody's goal is to sell and get more people paying you for what you do, right? I think that is the whole impetus of having a business. So I do think that salespeople can offer other salespeople a lot of value. Obviously, if you're talking, you have marketing people in your database, you have to meet the needs that they're trying to accomplish. Ultimately, if I'm not solving a pain point for somebody, then maybe there's other ways we can work together outside of just money changing hands, right? Maybe, we can help promote each other. Maybe we can refer each other, business. Maybe, you can offer me an exclusive on what you're doing, right? And that's a win for us to have that for our audience and our readership before anybody else does. But also we'll amplify that further than normal news, right? So, there's a lot of ways that we partner with people that doesn't have to be monetarily driven. But obviously, I think if I'm not solving value for somebody, I'm not doing my job. And I think that is the base of every conversation, right? I always want to know what I can do for you, and if sales isn't a part of that conversation, then it won't be. But it will be brought up if I feel like I can.
Absolutely.
I think I strayed a little bit away from your question there, Jess. But,
I think you answered it perfectly. And it actually goes into my next question for you, because we are talking about relationships, and your network is quite large compared to a lot of people. And I love that. And I admire that. And so there's people that might be listening who don't necessarily have that same network, and they don't necessarily go to as many events that you might go to. What's some advice that you would give people that are looking to seek those meaningful relationships, the long-lasting ones? Again, we've been connected now for about 6 years, which is quite a long time. And so I just want to hear from you. What advice?
I'll say this, I think take notes. I don't know, what you think about that, but like every time I go to an event, I write down who I met with. Whether it's on their business cards or I have a notes app on my phone I'll look at after the event. Every time I'm on a call with somebody, I'm taking notes about their own personal story as much as they'll tell me. But you have to care about the person, you're talking to. And I think even I run into that a lot where people don't care about me. They just care about the transaction or whatever, right? And that's fine, right? Everybody has every prerogative to approach that in the ways they want to. For me, if you don't want to connect on a personal level, I don't think you're going to reach the business success that you could otherwise, right? And that's not me trying to say exploit people, in order to get more money out of them. I don't think that way at all. But I do think if you remember that, somebody just got married or somebody's having a baby or, I would say congratulate them. Right? Like it's as simple as sending a quick email, or a card or a gift basket or something, right? And I think that goes a long way in the people aspect of what we do. And that's what I love about the cannabis industry. It's very ingrained in the people and community of it. Mm-hmm. And I think that's why I match so well with it because, I want the people to know that I care about them. I care about the cannabis industry success and the fact that people should not be in prison for a plant. I think I just saw a crazy stat in our newsletter. 200,000 arrests were made for possession. Most of them were for possession in 2023. And it's a problem, right? Yeah. And I think I as a person need to also be an advocate for the industry that, I'm working in. That's unacceptable. So I think you have to play a part in your industry's growth. You have to play a part in your partner's growth. And I think you have to care about it as a person in order to do that.
Absolutely. And also you are a good person. And so when people do talk to you, we can tell, people want to do business with people and they want to do business with good people. And you're one of those people.
I strive to be like you, Jess, if we're real.
No, you're absolutely incredible. And Elliot, before we wrap up, is there any final advice or insights you'd want to share with our listeners, whether they're interested in the financial media side, the partnership side, or the cannabis industry as a whole?
I mean, shameless plug here, right? Benzinga is a fun company, right? I mean, if you're looking at news every day, from a financial sense, if you're getting the Morning Brew newsletter, if you're getting the Bloomberg or the Insider newsletters, right? Fortune. I love the Fortune newsletters. Add Benzinga to your list, right? I would say we have a lot of free resources that you can utilize. Dip your toe into our ecosystem. I think it's a great one. We have a phenomenal leadership team, that I think has taken us in a great direction to be value additive to our readers. Right. We're very responsive. If you want to get involved in our events, we have events in cannabis, in digital assets, and fintech, and small cap. And I think that will only continue to grow. If you're looking for investment dollars, we'll help how we can. If you're just looking, to have your news covered, please reach out. I mean, Benzinga is here to be value additive. Right. And I'll keep saying that until I'm blue in the face. But, I think every media organization should be working for its audience. Otherwise, it's not working for the right reasons. So all that said, I think keep hustling, keep doing your thing, and hire Jessica Starman to do your PR.
I love that so much. Elliot, thank you so much for taking the time today. It's really been fantastic catching up. I appreciate it.
Oh, thank you for having me, Jess. Appreciate you all.
Awesome. And for everyone who wants to stay in touch with Elliot or learn more about Benzinga, be sure to check out the links in our show notes. And as always, thank you for tuning in to Communicating Capital. We'll see you next time.